this mode of thought and frees himself from it, allowing him to gravitate to something better. Focus 3 can best be thought of as a tree, with the least free-thinking areas towards the bottom and gradually becoming more free-thinking up to the top. With the lower branches, they are populated by all kinds of people involved in horrific practices who are basically slaves to their basest animal instincts. Many will not even be aware that they have died. This region equates to Monroe's F23, F24. Further up the tree, you find all the heaven and hell scenarios and other places created from people's expectations after death. They are populated by those who had very strict fundamentalist religious views on what would happen to them in the afterlife. You will also find many other groups and individuals engaged in an almost limitless amount of other scenarios of their own making. Again, while some of them are aware they have transitioned from F1, others may be unaware that they have died or are confused about exactly what has happened to them. This region equates to Monroe's belief system territories of F25 minus F26. Then, towards the upper branches of the F3 tree, which equates to Monroe's F27 label, you have the free-thinking areas where people are most well-balanced and have no fundamentalist mindsets or warped desires to kill babies with chainsaws. They are very happy, fun-loving, and joyful. I tend to refer to their attitude as dead and loving it. These upper, or more correctly, wider, free-thinking areas are also huge in number, and you can find all manner of interesting people and locales there. There are too many upper F3 areas to possibly count, but they do include some important locations made famous by the Monroe School, such as the park, where people often come to chill out while recovering from their physical world experience, the Life Review Center, the library, and so on. I honestly urge you to be prepared for a bewildering array of worlds when you engage in F3. Some are wonderful, some funny, some horrific. You get all kinds of towns and places full of people, and you might just come across people living alone. It all depends on the person in question. Lots of people are dying these days, with no particular religious beliefs, so they end up in transition just basically doing what they have always done. Basically, the F3 regions are chock full of people who are acting out all manner of scenarios, and I really do mean all manner of scenarios you could possibly think of and more, infinitely more. At the base level, you find people engaged in the most disgusting acts of depravity, where child torture, murder, rape et al. Are the norm. As you go higher, or more correctly wider, you come across regions where people are engaged in all manner of other pursuits, many of which have a religious or mystical slant. Beyond that, you get to the upper branches where everyone is the most free-thinking and well-balanced, as I have described earlier. Once you can reliably project your consciousness into these regions, you can have a lot of fun chatting to the locals and finding out what's what. But I do agree that it is very spooky at first because it all seems so real. That's because it is real. The key thing to do, or rather not to do, is start to overly analyze whatever the circumstances are that you find yourself involved in. The best state of mind to be in is that of a passive, mildly curious observer. Problem is, if you begin to react to the circumstances, especially emotionally, your own release of emotion will cause reality fluctuations that can, and often do, vary from mild to wild. What happens then is, you become entangled in a situation where you have the astral circumstances you found yourself in. Then superimposed on that are the circumstances you are creating from your own release of thought, release emotion, which all gets mighty confusing and generally scuppers the experience. If you feel circumstances are getting out of hand, rather than try and make it right, simply go back to physical F1 and project again. You do come across some interesting cases. During one exploration, I met a very interesting lady called Mary, who had built herself a wooden church and was waiting for God to come and bless it for her. You cannot help but have compassion for these people. She had held her faith all her life, that one day she would be meeting God after she died, and there she was, waiting for Him. She asked me if I was waiting for God too, and if I was lost. I said I was a traveler passing through, as I tend to do. She invited me in and offered to share what she had, saying if I was lost, then I could stay in her little place while waiting for Him, and He would bless me as He would her. Once I was blessed, then off I'd go to heaven and all that jazz. I gave her my thanks and once I was out of sight, phased back to physical to make notes. Why people sometimes get stuck in F3. People often waste loads of time in the various hollow heavens and hells that I have talked about earlier, as well as all manner of other scenarios. They get stuck in these worlds as they simply don't know anything else. This is the afterlife that they fundamentally believed they would be going to. So that's what they get. Also, you have to realize that many people end up living in circumstances very much the same as they did while physical. Loads of people are living their lives within F3, and they don't fully realize they have actually physically died. There is a part of them that is well aware, but they just get wrapped up in their day-to-day affairs, just like they would have done while physical. Such people will carry on living in such scenarios until the penny drops and/or they receive some help from outside. Emotional loops. Emotional loops are an even more serious situation, however, more so than a hollow heaven. People often get in the unfortunate situation where they are releasing a particular mix of emotion that is creating a certain kind of objective scenario. Then they are reacting to that scenario in a particular way. But that particular way of reacting causes that same particular mix of emotions to be released, which causes the person to react to the scenario in that same particular way. So that same particular mix of emotions are released, so they react to the scenario in that same particular way, etc., etc. Of course, within the physical, people can become locked in these kinds of weird circumstances in dreams. But it isn't long before the alarm clock goes off, or some physical demand comes along and the person snaps out of it. But once someone is sans physical, then different rules apply. There's no need to eat or to excrete, no need for sleep, and so forth. So for someone caught in a loop, there is nothing much that will come along and make a demand, break their attention, thus snap them out of it. For example, if there was a need for sleep, then, after 20 hours or so, the person would get tired, fall asleep, and thus break the construct. Or they would end up starving hungry, or eventually get a severe need to use the bathroom or whatever. But no such thing applies, and people can become locked in these kinds of constructs for what we would gauge as a time period. This time period could be from minutes to even hundreds of years. There are no hard and fast rules. Retrieval work. The solution is to somehow interrupt a person's thought patterns to make them start thinking of something else. As they do so, the objective circumstances they keep repetitively finding themselves wrapped up in will dissipate. There are many people resident within the upper branches of F3 who try to help people free themselves from this kind of predicament. They are usually referred to as helpers. Plus, you get people such as myself who regularly project to this area and see it as a challenge to break some of these constructs in which people become entangled. Some people call it retrieval work, and I too use that term loosely. Helpers, and people in F1 who engage in retrieval work, can also try to help those living in closed-off belief system scenarios, such as the hollow heavens, hells, and all the other scenarios that people end up in. Helpers from these upper regions are always on hand to help these people, and often try to get through to hopeful cases whenever there is a possibility that the individual in question is beginning to question his or her circumstances. Eventually, people start to question the validity of their circumstances. Thus, the framework of the belief construct is gradually laid bare, and people progressively gravitate to the upper branches of F3. Note, when I use the term top or upper to describe this region, I don't mean in a superior sense, like this top region is more religious. If anything, quite the opposite is the case. The people who are engaged in the religious constructs are the ones caught lower down, which is kind of ironic when you think about it. This is the main reason why I, personally, detest any kind of fundamentalist religion. These kinds of belief constructs are presented within the physical as a boon to progression in the non-physical, when in fact they turn out to be a barrier. But within primary focus 3, you can also see that many more people are disengaging from the physical these days, with no particular mystical or religious beliefs, and are thus finding the progression through transition very much easier to achieve. Creating your own environments in F3. Within Focus 3, you can construct whatever you like. I made a tree house in a dense forest that ran to the edge of a lake. I made an ocean and a lovely open-plan house with a veranda that led out onto the sand. I've created all manner of plants, grasses, fish, and other animals. Now the great thing is, within Focus 3, once you create something, it remains until you choose to change it, so you can go to it whenever you like. You should also be aware, however, that so can anyone else, both those who live in F3 and other people phasing there like you. So don't be surprised if you turn up sometimes and find other people there. It's quite tricky learning to create things in F3. You have to merge with the underlying subjective energy. It is not like F2 where your thoughts immediately come to life. You have to concentrate a little harder. But there is a knack to it that you soon pick up, and then it becomes second nature. If you get stuck, simply ask someone to help you. You'll find people are ever so helpful. Also, upper F3, do not be surprised to get all manner of people who obviously know you very well coming up to say hello. Yet you haven't got the foggiest idea who they are. A good reason for learning how to create F3 environments now is that people in the know, so to speak, construct a place for themselves. So, when they permanently disengage in a physical sense, i.e. when they die, that is where they go, to their own place within F27, or the upper branches of Focus 3 as I call it. One final point. One of the useful aspects of F3 exploration is that you contact people, get their details, and try to verify that they used to live in the physical world later. I have managed to make a number of verifications of people I met within Focus 3 of consciousness of my phasing model. 6. In depth. Focus 4. The next step inwards is Focus 4 of consciousness. Once you have finished your physical world experience and have spent some time in F3 adjusting back to subjective reality again, you will at some point be ready to switch back to primary Focus 4. F4 is where things really start getting interesting. Once we engage with Focus 4, we become our wider selves. I don't like using the term higher self as you have no higher or lower self. You are you. It's just that you have focused your attention from your F4 perspective to a narrow F1 perspective for the purpose of experiencing the physical world. When you engage F4, you are engaging your full perspective once again. Those whose primary focus is F4 have no form at all. They exist as energy essences, or what we might call a point of consciousness. I can't really tell you how many people are resident in F4, but it is certainly a huge number in human terms. I'm not sure how many people will remember the kids' TV sci-fi series of about 30 years ago or so. It was called Captain Scarlet, and you had what were known as the voice of the Mysterons. They were these mysterious beings that would talk to you out of nowhere. Well, that's a bit like how it is communicating with people who live within Focus 4. So what's Focus 4 like? Well, you need to realize that F4 is nothing like F1, F2, or F3. It's unique. You phase into what feels like a huge interconnecting communications network. In a way, it's like plugging your computer into the internet, but you are plugging your mind into an infinite network of other minds. There is, of course, a lot more to it than that. But in a nutshell, that's the simplest explanation I can come up with. While it is an exciting thing to do, I have to mention that it is not for the faint of heart or for anyone who is not totally grounded in themselves mentally. The problem, you might say, is you can get to feeling like you have lost your own mind. Thing is, we get so used to having only ourselves in mind, and communicating in this area is fully mind to mind. So what you do is merge your mind with another mind, or minds. Now multiple merging is really freaky, lol. And you communicate via thoughts, imagery, feelings, and so forth, in ways that are appropriate for the subject matter you are communicating about. In a sense, though, it feels like someone is invading your mind, and the more egotistical parts of you may battle against it. With me, it took about 100 attempts before I became comfortable with the process. The graduates that Monroe talks about in his work about must surely be people who have adopted Focus 4 of consciousness as their primary focus. I can see no other explanation. I am also convinced that Monroe touched on Focus 4 quite a number of times during his experiences, but for some reason the penny didn't quite drop with him. With me, it was my frustration in my attempts to go beyond F27 of his model that led me into the discovering of Focus 4 of consciousness. Not that I actually saw it as Focus 4 at that time. The label came later, but it was obvious that the area was a completely different area to the transition area of Focuses 23 through 27 of the Monroe model. As I have said, there are many many people resident within Focus 4, pure energy essences you might call them, that you can tap into. These people are quite knowledgeable and do come across as kind of godlike, you could say. But that's only because they are subjective energy essences that exist primarily as a point of consciousness, so to speak. When we each, for want of a better word, complete our current movement through consciousness, or as Monroe was saying, graduate, we too will reside within Focus 4 solely as an energy essence, or a point of consciousness. This is simply part and parcel of adopting Focus 4 as your primary focus, instead of Focus 1 or Focus 3. But I guess people in the past have just misunderstood what's what. If I had come across Focus 4 before Frida and Harith, my guides, had given me a detailed briefing of what to expect, then even I could well have mistaken my interactions as some kind of communication with divine being. Because that's precisely the way they come across. They radiate a kind of energy that tends to turn you to emotional jelly. But they are not gods as such. The energy they radiate is merely a product of adopting Focus 4 as your primary focus. If any of us chose to do the same, we would radiate the same energetic signature. Well, that is what I am told. I won't actually know until I try it myself, of course. I should point out here that I have also discovered people in the wider reality who have adopted a kind of semi-F4 state. People in this state are kind of half in F4 and half out of it, so to speak. They can also come across as kind of godlike if you come into contact them without knowing what's going on. Again, it's due to the energy signature. The strange thing is, we actually are now resident as a point of consciousness within Focus 4. We have not in any way left Focus 4. What we have done is to adopt a different primary focus for the purposes of our experience. You can imagine it as one continuum of consciousness that extends like a telephoto lens, if you like, from Focus 4 through to Focus 1. What we objectively view as death in subjective energy terms is an objective translation of the action of a person shifting their primary focus from Focus 1 to Focus 3. After your life within Focus 3, you, in a manner of speaking, die again when you shift your primary focus from Focus 3 to Focus 4. And that completes your cycle. You could say, note, I have to be wary of using terms such as beginning or end, because when you are speaking within the context of Focus 4, these terms simply don't exist. From the point of view of Focus 4, your life here is a movement that you initiate in consciousness for the purposes of your experience. How Focus 4 fits in with the rest of our system. As I have said before, we in our F4 states decided to create this physical universe, and lots of others besides, all for the purpose of allowing us varied opportunities for new experiences. When it comes to setting up a physical world system like our physical universe, certain supply lines and structures have to be put into place. Each physical world system has 3 basic areas of consciousness that ultimately connect to Focus 4. So the main area or ultimate creative source is Focus 4. This area is common to all the physical worlds that are connected to it. Focus 4 is what you might call an umbrella area, and the other 3 areas of each physical world within our system are nested within that overall umbrella. So say you had Focus 4 and 100 physical world realities. Note, there are actually an infinite number of other physical world realities within our whole system. But here let us say there are just 100. Each physical reality has a Focus 1, obviously, because physical reality is Focus 1. So there are 100 Focus 1s, together with 100 Focus 2s and 100 Focus 3s. Each of these areas is nested within one Focus 4. The best way of thinking of Focus 4, in my opinion, is to think of it as the ultimate creative source of all that exists within our entire system. In other words, all the original plans, archetypes, models, etc., of all the physical realities connected to Focus 4 are held within this area. Focus 3 is a transition area that is reserved for people returning from their physical experience. People generally have to go through a period of shaking off all the belief constructs they brought into objective reality during their physical experience to enable them to merge fully with the subjective reality of F4 again, at which point they can decide what to experience next. Focus 3 also has sections that serve as what could be termed areas of our collective unconscious, but for our purposes, thinking of it as a transition area will suffice. The original archetypes held in Focus 4, that are to do with all the potential states and probabilities possible within our particular physical dimension are downloaded into Focus 2. What people then do is pick and choose whatever actions they fancy and play with them within their area of Focus 2. Essentially, the action of doing this creates a pool of individual probabilities within Focus 2, and each person in question decides which of these probabilities to bring into objective reality, i.e. bring into Focus 1. In other words, each individual creates their reality subjectively within Focus 2, and then they insert it into Focus 1 on an ongoing basis. Please note, not all physical realities are built on the same basis. Not all physical realities, for example, incorporate emotions like we do. So the potential states and probabilities possible for other physical dimensions will naturally vary. Therefore, each physical reality will have a correspondingly different set of potential states and probabilities downloaded into their Focus 2 area. But the ultimate source for all these potential states and probabilities is Focus 4. The 4 areas of consciousness are not distinctly separate. They are intertwined immeasurably, and each area is associated with particular actions, explorations, and/or movements in consciousness, while being fully connected to and interacting with each of the other areas. Above all, I would say that there are 2 humongous challenges in thinking associated with Focus 4 of consciousness, as follows. 1, it is an area of purely subjective reality, so nothing actually exists as an objective, observable form. To feel your whole sense of body totally disintegrate is not something you forget in a hurry. This is why I do not recommend beginners attempt phasing to Focus 4. There are no dangers, don't get me wrong, but the effects are mind-blowing, and I do not say this lightly. Seeing my whole physical life as a concept changed my outlook on life significantly overnight. The notion of concepts is one that you will have to fully grasp in order to make headway in F4. In F4, everything is to do with subjective concepts, and F4 is the source of all concepts that eventually manifest in objective reality. You can decide to merge with the underlying subjective energy that forms the concept of anything you care to think of and experience being that thing, or more correctly, the concept of that thing. You can experience being the concept of a flower, a rock, a cloud, an ant, or a human being. For the really adventurous, you can also experience more abstract concepts, like being a sound, this is fun, or a day of the week, that's right, you can experience the concept of Tuesday. There is no end of concepts that you can engage with. I told you it was freaky. 2, it is an area of simultaneous time, as opposed to linear time that we experience within this physical reality. So everything that is about to happen, has happened, and is happening, is all happening at once within the same moment. Within infinity, everything happens an infinite number of times. This means, of course, that there is no death, no beginning or ending. Everything just is. However, at the same time, there is ever-expanding consciousness. Hey, it's hard to get your head around, but who said infinite reality and the prospect of ever-expanding consciousness would be easy? It's all part of the fun. Ultimately, sampling F4 consciousness can be a very rewarding experience when you get it right, because then all your wider self is laid open for you, and you can revel in the excitement and the enjoyment of it all. Stand transfixed by the sheer awesomeness of it all. Find out who you truly are. Know there is no death. Know that life is just one continuous cycle of knowing that has always been. Know that there is only ever-expanding consciousness. Engage the concept of infinity. Become that concept within Focus 4, and you will never be the same person again. Imagine the sheer ecstasy of 1,000,000 orgasms all happening at once. Those are the kind of sensations Focus 4 gives you, and that's just scratching the surface. Beyond Focus 4 other systems. I have been asked several times if there is anything beyond Focus 4. The answer is, to my knowledge, within our particular system, there are just 4 primary areas. But consciousness doesn't end there. Consciousness is infinite. There may well be an infinite number of other systems, either like ours, or perhaps wildly different. Nobody to my knowledge knows anything about these potential other systems. Monroe talks of Focus 3435, but as I have said earlier, I believe that Monroe was experiencing something else. I believe his F-35 experiences were actually relating to areas of our wider physical, where alternate physical dimensions, within our F1 to F4 system, seemed to converge. Haha, no wonder I couldn't find it. The interesting aspect about these other physical worlds within our system, and the weird thing about them, is that they all occupy the same physical space. The actual characteristics of the different physical dimensions within our system can be wildly different, but they all have this one thing in common, in that they occupy the same space. Anyhow, what separates them, if you like, are these transdimensional areas in consciousness that allows each physical universe to overlay on one another. Now, I have it on good authority that it is possible to travel between transdimensional areas. When I say travel, I mean actual physical travel. It is also possible to do this non-physically as well, so I am told. So my theory is that these UFO sightings might in fact be a kind of bleed-through from another transdimensional area. An area that has people living within it who have already learned how to design some kind of craft with the ability to travel between physical dimensions. Anyway, back to the potential for other systems outside of our own F1 to F4 model. From reading Monroe's later work, I wonder where the heck he was sometimes. He was way out, but not in Focus 4 terms. There was something else. Seriously, I reckon he was about to attempt to step into another system of consciousness from Focus 3, entering into an extra-dimensional state that is outside of our F1 to F4 system completely. That is what I have been trying to study for ages, the possibility of these extra-dimensional areas. I reckon that is why his physical was put at risk. Okay, I'm guessing now, I admit, but I am going to completely retrace his footsteps in the future. If he were trying to enter another dimension totally, i.e. another system, then that is just incredible. That is not Focus 3, 4, or 5. That is just completely into the unknown, and I mean total unknown. Unless he was attempting to enter Focus 4 while holding a complete objective, knowing of that fact. That would just be crazy. You'd just be short-circuiting every subjective energy circuit that ever was. I doubt anyone could have the objective will to do that. Just too many natural laws against you. I just wonder what on earth he found and what secrets there are still to be unlocked from Monroe. I'm going to begin again from page 1 and work through it until that final piece of the jigsaw falls into place. Related information 1. Frank's findings on the concept of God. People often ask about God, and if I have ever come across evidence of a godlike figure in the style of the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition or the more esoteric Eastern variety. I have to say, in my opinion, that the familiar concepts of God or indeed gods are belief constructs that various peoples throughout human history have formulated to explain their reality. Plenty of people continue to subscribe to such ideas to this day, and when they cross over to F3 they proceed to engage in the many belief system territories with their hollow heavens and hells and all the rest of it as I have described earlier. Once they emerge from these areas, they gravitate to the more free-thinking upper branches of F3. And people in these areas certainly do not subscribe to the traditional notions of God that many people in the physical tend to think of. I do think a lot of these notions of gods and angels, etc., have come about by people who have made contact with those residing in our wider reality without knowing exactly what was happening. They then proceeded to interpret the situation according to their predefined beliefs. When we, from our F1 perspective, come across those who are living in F3, we can often mistake them for some kind of divine beings due to the energy signature that is given off by those who have adopted F3 as their primary focus. This energy can induce waves of emotion in us that can reduce us to tears of overpowering love. Often the folks in F3 will tone this energy down in order to ease communication, and you can certainly ask them to do this if you find the energy they radiate to be too overpowering. This effect is multiplied when you encounter people who have adopted F4 as their primary focus. The energies we are talking about at this point are truly awesome. To give you an idea, the energy given off by these people can reduce the most hardened, evil, serial-killing cum chainsaw-wielding baby killer into a blubbering wreck of emotional jelly in 3 seconds flat. And I'm not joking. So again, if I had come across Focus 4 before Freda and Harith, my guides, had given me a detailed briefing of what to expect, then even I could well have mistaken my interactions as some kind of communication with divine being. Because that's precisely the way they come across. They radiate a kind of energy that tends to turn you to emotional jelly. But they are not gods as such. The energy they radiate is merely a product of adopting Focus 4 as your primary focus. If any of us chose to do the same, we would radiate the same energetic signature. Instead of what Monroe and company call pure unconditional love, the prime energy of the universe, I think it is more correct to call this energy pure subjective energy, the source of which is Focus 4 of consciousness. I do not subscribe to the unconditional love idea, as it stems from a more poetic description of the underlying facts of the matter, which are all I am interested in. Pure unconditional love is more the effect that pure subjective energy has on us when we encounter it, rather than the cause. The cause is pure subjective energy. I should make very clear at this juncture that many pieces of the Focus 4 jigsaw have yet to fall into place for me. In order to fill in the blanks, as it were, I agree there is the temptation to begin stretching the narrative. It would be a handy release if I did offer myself a degree of poetic license. But I am resisting this temptation entirely in favor of following a strictly scientific approach. Monroe, unfortunately in my view, did occasionally display a love for poetic metaphor, and I am determined not to make that mistake. However, the energy essences that hold Focus 4 as their primary focus are not themselves responsible for the radiation of this pure subjective energy, nor are they the source of this energy. They each are an energetic personality essence, and as such, they are a focus of this energy, just as we all are. The only real difference being between us and them, so to speak, is the primary focus we choose to hold. I have tried to find out where this pure subjective energy comes from, but no one appears to know. We obviously all evolved from it. Somehow this subjective energy became focused and developed into a kind of primary energetic personality essence. And this is, I believe, what all the old mystical works are objectifying and calling God. Now this primary energetic personality essence somehow began to develop into many, many individual focuses that somehow became us and all we have created. But as to how it all began, originally, I don't mean how the physical universe began, but how all of it began. I simply do not know. I think it never did begin. I think the subjective side of things have just always been, which is a pretty mind-blowing concept. 2. Frank's discoveries concerning guides. I do subscribe to the concept of guides in the loose sense of the word, although I tend to prefer the term helpers, as the former does carry a lot of mystical baggage which I tend to dislike. I did go through a phase where I thought all this guide stuff was nonsense, but my curiosity got the better of me and I thought, well, let's give it a go. So I mentally dumped all my thoughts of it being just some kind of mystical nonsense and began projecting with an entirely open mind on the matter. I suspected that someone had been following me around on my astral journeys for a while, but I could never nail anything down. Matters came to a head, as my guide knew they would, and one morning I just said something like, "Look, I know you've been following me around for a while now. So let's cut all this nonsense and just make yourself known." Which he did, as again he knew he eventually would. Since then I never looked back, and I now wonder what I ever did without them. I've got 2 regulars, my main one Harath, and there's this woman called Freda. Guides come from all manner of places. Also, they know all about the person they are attempting to interact with, so they tend to approach you in a manner suitable to you. With me, for example, Harath first began to stimulate my curiosity. Then he gave me the distinct impression someone was following me around and generally looking after my interests. Also, I found there are what I call guides in passing. I perceive them as people who just happened to sense I was having some difficulty, and as they were in the vicinity, they made a short detour to help me out, after which they just carry on with whatever it was they were doing. I've never actually seen these people, but I do sense them in the distance. From my experiences, I would say the first step to take is to become open to the whole idea. Then just ask for help in a small way first. Also be specific. It's no use asking for help in general. Trust is very important too. People have this idea that the astral is a really nasty place, full of all kinds of devils and demons. Well, I've had my full share of scary moments on the lower branches of F3, but none of these frightful situations can harm you in any way. And none of these people have any real power except to scare you and cause you to release fear. which instantly goes to creating and fueling all manner of scary circumstances that surround you. The plain and simple fact is, if you lend yourself open to the concept of guidance, then there are many people, non-physical, who will give you a helping hand. If you are with a guide, they will not let you experience more than they know you can bear. Which means you can go ahead and experience whatever it is, fully in the knowledge that, however confusing it may appear at the time, you will be able to work through it eventually. As an example, one of my experiences was of being taken to a garden with children playing all around, somewhere lying sleeping in the shade of the trees, who had been badly traumatized as a result of what they had experienced on the physical. Eventually, they would awaken and learn how to play again. It turns out that one of those children was me. Realization of this caused an instant and uncontrollable burst of emotion that is still within me even now. I can feel it as I type, welling up at the sides of my head, wanting to explode outwards into floods of tears. Quite why, I do not know. All I do know is that need to keep working on solving the mystery of what this is about in a rational, logical manner. As I said, the term guide should be used in the loose sense of the word, because there are many people in F3 who will help you to varying degrees, and who could be labeled guides or helpers. This is because F3 is generally full of helpful people. There are also quite specific people who will be taking an interest in your journey, let's say. Members of what I call your non-physical family, who you can contact within the upper branches of F3. Sometimes when you are exploring F3, you will come across all kinds of people who will greet you like an old friend, and you haven't the faintest idea who they are. But that's just another thing you get used to. One important pointer concerning guides is this. With the whole guide thing, you have to be very careful you don't trip up over yourself and start creating various constructs within Focus 2 in order to fill the need for a guide. Each of us has many different constructs or aspects of ourselves that we create within Focus 2 for all manner of purposes. People who subscribe to mystical belief constructs such as a higher selves often meet these aspects they have created within Focus 2 in order to satisfy this purpose, not that they actually see it that way. As a general rule, you have to be very careful regarding Focus 2. It's a real sneaky area that can catch you out if you are not careful. What about the appearance of guides? I find that guides, like many F3 people in their raw state, i.e. when they have not adopted their favorite human form, can come across as a ball of sparkly light. Well, that's how I perceive it. You quickly get to recognize them because they radiate a loving kind of warmth, which initially makes you feel all humble and gooey inside. But you soon get used to it. They can also read your thoughts, and they will approach you in a form they believe will be most pleasing for you. That is why, if you read other people's accounts of meeting guides, the style of approach will always tend to differ. This is why guides sometimes appear in forms of angels, etc., depending on the expectations of the individual. Sometimes this is due to the experiencer's own perception, i.e. an overlay experience. But there is no doubt that guides themselves will often choose a form which they think you will be comfortable with or expect in some way. All in all, imagination plays a big role. If you relax your mind and imagine the circumstances in which you would most like to meet a guide, this will send out a powerful signal that you are ready to meet up. Guides will help you greatly in your exploration of the wider reality, and they will help you to realize some astounding things. Concerning my regular guide Harath, I now know he is a future aspect of me living in another physical reality universe who came to find the me living in this physical reality universe. It's all absolutely incredible stuff. This brings me on to the concept of reincarnation, which I have discovered is a bit more complex than people have thought up until now. 3 Frank's findings concerning the concept of reincarnation. Reincarnation is a confusing issue. I used to subscribe to the notion that we all lived sequential human lives, one after the other, as did Monroe. You will find that the standard concept of reincarnation runs through his work. However, I've now come to the conclusion that this is not quite right. It is fair to say, from a Focus 4 perspective, that we all certainly do experience many human lives. The difference is, we don't experience them sequentially, we experience them all simultaneously. Focus 4 of consciousness holds what you might call our individual primary essence. Each individual is a focus of his or her primary essence. Stemming from each of our primary essences, if you like, are many, many other focuses. A person may have thousands of other focuses who are experiencing physical lives, both in our physical world and in many other physical dimensions too. But these other focuses are not us. But they are directly connected to us, if you like, as they are a focus of the same primary essence. We can merge with these other focuses as they are of the same primary essence, and they can merge with us. When I say merge, I mean we can search within us and experience them. They are most certainly other lives, and other lives we can merge with and experience. But they are not us. They are other focuses of our primary essence. Again, within subjective reality there is no time. There is no such thing as past and future. All is present. This aspect of subjective reality is one of the most misunderstood aspects and causes a lot of confusion. I've said a number of times that all this is to do with the way these, what are called transdimensional areas in consciousness, function. I've been studying them for a while, and they are mighty complex to get to grips with. I still have not managed to suss them out yet. But what people are calling past lives are in fact encounters with other focuses of their primary essence. The basic mistake people make is they assume the other person is them. How can it not be them? People think to themselves, after all, they know so much about them. They can sense them inside, so it must have been another life, they assume. Just like when people looked to the sun and tracked its movements. It was obvious the sun revolved around the earth. Of course, the sun does not actually move around the earth at all. Quite the opposite. In a similar vein, these people are assuming that the people they are merging with are them. But the people that we encounter within us in this particular respect are not us. They are other focuses of our primary essence that we can merge with. I have done this a number of times. All you need do is project to focus 4 and all will become apparent to you. What people are calling past life regression is in fact a merging with another focus in the action of an F1, F4 overlay experience. But I actually doubt that even these are all true mergings with other focuses. It may just be people observing other people within focus 3 and not understanding that there is even a focus 3. There is a difference between merging and observing. When you merge with another focus, you actually feel as if you have become that person. You haven't actually become them. All you have done is to merge with them. But it does feel like you have become them for the duration of the merging. Hence the reason why people mistakenly assume the other person was them at some stage. Again, there is no time within subjective reality. I cannot stress this point too highly. It is the source of much confusion and misunderstanding. It is fair to say that at least some of our physical focuses who are experiencing our physical dimension may be engaged in several different time frames simultaneously. So in this sense, and in this sense only, we, from where we are sitting in this time frame, may have other focuses who are currently engaged in physical lives in our historical past, and perhaps we can offer ourselves glimpses of their lives, seeing how we are sharing the same physical system. However, they are still experiencing their lives at the same time as we are experiencing ours. I am not saying that the people who are thinking they are connecting with past lives are talking a complete load of BS. Nope, I am saying they are making the basic misassumption that they were once the other person. They are making the mistake of assuming their lives are occurring in a linear time framework, i.e. occurring in a sequential manner. In other words, that each life proceeds one after the other. Nope, all your focuses are living simultaneously, and every one of your focuses is a different person. What connects them all, if you like, is they are a focus of the same primary essence within focus 4 of consciousness, and that is what makes it possible to merge with them. You do have other focuses that you can merge with, but they are not you. You are you and they are they. But people are so transfixed with the notion of linear time they cannot think beyond it. 4. Frank on retrievals. I have talked about retrieval work many times in the past. This is when people in F3 decide to dedicate time to helping those who are stuck in emotional loops and belief constructs lower down the F3 tree. These people are usually referred to as helpers. There are also those who are currently physically engaged yet have decided to do their bit to help those on the lower branches of F3. Their work is generally known as retrieval work. The author and afterlife researcher Bruce Moen is one such expert in the art of retrievals, and his approach involves helping people to make use of an F1, F3 overlay approach, which doesn't involve a full focus switch to F3. I too have engaged in retrieval work from time to time, in the early days with the assistance and guidance of Harath, my guide. The idea is to try and contact those who are trapped in emotional loops and such like on the lower F3 branches and hand them over to the care of helpers who will take them to the various reception centers in the upper branches of F3. What follows is an account of my very first retrieval, just to give you an idea of what they are like. I had discussed trying retrievals with Harath in the past, and one day he evidently felt that I was ready for it. Well, this is how it went. I pick it up from initial contact with Harath. Your boy is in good hands, refers to the horse I lost. I have a perception of a white stallion, only he kept the black mane. Yeah, that would be typical. And the lower half still flops left, and the upper flops right. What a crazy horse. Thanks for letting me know. I might try and pay a visit sometime. So what's on the cards today, Harry boy? Sorry, Harath. You sure you are up for it, Frankie? Ah, so you do have a concept of revenge. Yeah, I'm up for it, but I'm not sure where I fit in. Just use your imagination and go with the flow. Remember, I'll be in the background to give you some pointers. Where are we going? Just over there and down a bit. How come we are already here? Because you came direct to me, I didn't come to you. You're still not used to reaching out directly yet, are you? I suppose it will take a while after your years of going around and around beforehand. All right, cut the sarcasm. Mr. Almighty, who only happens to have a million-year advantage. Okay, so if you're so clever, why do you need me? Technically, I don't. But your radiation is more suited to the task in hand, and it gives you experience. What do you mean radiation? You don't seem to be radiating to me. Well, not any more than normal. That is because I tone it down, and you are getting more used to it. So what's it like when you are fully switched on then? You really want to see? Depends on whether I'll survive or not. Let's save that for some other time. We have work to do, come follow me. It was like we traveled along a series of tunnels. I could have sworn we were underground somewhere. I couldn't see a thing as it was completely black, so I hung on tight. After a short while we stopped. Harath, where are you? I can't see a darned thing. Be still, reach out to me, and you'll sense where I am. I'm confused. I sense something awful here. The atmosphere makes me want to puke. Where the heck are we? There's some kind of pressure, like we're under the earth. If you really must know, it's a mass grave. Ah, you're not joking, are you? You mean right now we're moving through heaps of rotting corpses? Yuck, that's disgusting. Couldn't you have found some damsel in distress we could rescue? Shh, we're almost at the spot. Feel that? Hey, now you mention it, I do sense a kind of movement. There's something familiar, but I can't get a fix on it. What do you reckon it is? Oh shit, Harath, something just wrapped itself around my legs. What do I do now? Pick it up, what? Pick up, okay, if you insist. As I reached down, it became clear to me why the movement felt familiar. Taking hold of the object, I immediately recognized the form. It was human, probably no more than about 6 years of age. The body was trembling, using all its strength to latch onto my legs. I managed to unhook its arms and bring the body up to chest level and held it tight with both arms, at which point the body became absolutely still. Right, let's go. Hey Harath, for once we are in total agreement. We traveled back through the series of tunnels. Then there was a flash and a feeling of acceleration like some afterburner just kicked in. Soon we came out of warp speed and began to slow. Suddenly we came to a halt. Harath knew that I'd had enough and took the form. He held it to his heart, and the child was instantly shrouded in a golden light. Harath moved his hands away, and instinctively I went to reach out, thinking the child would fall. But the form remained close to him, suspended and bathed by the light. That's quite a party trick you have there. Speaking of parties, weren't you thinking of going someplace else? Very funny, Harath, ha ha ha. Besides, there's no way they'd let me in looking like this and stinking of rotting flesh. You need to go back and get cleaned up. Yeah, cheers, Harath. Got quite a few notes to make as well. Let's try something a bit more glamorous next time. What you say? I then returned to F1 and made notes. Hopefully this gives you an idea of the kind of thing that retrieval work involves. While this work can be highly rewarding, I should advise that it is not for the nervous. You will engage with some truly horrific circumstances, all the worst that humanity has to offer and then some. At the same time, however, the satisfaction gained from rescuing someone from such horrific circumstances is its own reward. 5. Frank on alternative physical dimensions. I have talked about the nature of our F1 physical world and the fact that there are many other physical universes too, all of which make up our system. Now, while I believe it may be possible in the future to construct some kind of vehicle to allow us to travel between these physical dimensions, it certainly is possible to travel between them non-physically, and this is an area of research that I have only recently become involved in. I can report that I have recently traveled non-physically to see a planet in an alternative physical dimension with the help of my guide, Harath. I am still at the very early stages of my research into the subject of alternate physical worlds, so I'm sorry if my descriptions of this world come across as being a bit sketchy. It's just that I have only visited this other physical dimension 4 times so far, and the first time I was simply too in awe to think properly. Also, Harath has taken me to the same area each time, the area where he once grew up, so I'm not sure how representative this area is with the planet as a whole. Another difficulty putting a general spoke in the works is, because of the awesome nature of the experience, I'm finding it difficult to continually keep my thoughts and emotions in check. So I often experience reality fluctuations. From what I have gathered thus far, they have basically the same human form, only they are of a smaller build than the average Anglo-Saxon. I know there are male and female, and they wear basic clothing. I don't know yet whether or not they have the ability to reproduce in a normal Earth sense, and I haven't seen any children. They have houses and streets similar to what we have. Only the material from which these are made differs from the normal steel, concrete, brick, and glass structures we have here on Earth. I'm not sure about transportation. I haven't seen any cars or buses. As I say, they do have streets, but the ones I have seen have no markings on them, suggesting any kind of traffic instructions. Harath says they can transport themselves as necessary, using genetically driven craft, which I talk about further down. They appear not to have any kind of government or monetary system. While they can communicate by talking like we do, they are also in touch with each other on a telepathic or mind-to-mind level as well. They always talk to me verbally, however, as Harath says, that is the custom. The people have always been happy to see me and expected my arrival. They smile and laugh just as we do, and they know about our existence here on Earth. As far as technology is concerned, they are way more advanced than us. For example, their physical matter appears to be genetically derived. The best I can currently describe it is, rather than manually constructing a house like we do, using bricks, mortar, and so forth, they grow theirs out of various kinds of genetic material. This, I admit, sounds a bit daft, because it conjures up images of planting a house seed in a patch of soil somewhere, feeding and watering it each day, encouraging it to grow. Yet as daft as that may sound, Harath assures me that is the basic principle. Though the actual technology, when put into practice, is way different. The planet is subject to a cycle of daylight and nightfall. I am not sure if they are subject to weather conditions in the same way we are, or whether they measure time like we do. On my first visit, it was nighttime, and the area was lit by rows of lights, which jutted out from the tops of the houses. But they have neither electricity nor light bulbs, as the light is generated genetically. I do have a pet theory that some so-called UFO reports you hear about might be actual craft created by people from other physical dimensions who have developed the ability to build a interdimensional vehicle. Perhaps I ought to make clear that UFO sightings and the like really don't interest me. The few bits and bobs I have read about over the years seem too far-fetched for words, IMO. You know, all the stuff about the USA being in league with aliens, and there's that Area 51 place. Plus all the conspiracy stuff. Okay, there may be an element of truth somewhere, but I reckon it has long since been lost under layer upon layer of cack that's been produced over the years. But what I do find fascinating is the genetic technology they have on Harath's home planet. Just recently, on the subject of transportation, Harath has been explaining to me about how they have craft made from materials which are genetically derived. And at the heart of this craft is a kind of biological propulsion device. But much of what Harath is explaining goes way over my head. He tries to explain it simply by relating it to my experience of astral travel. We have the ability to utilize non-physical energies in order to travel throughout the astral. Plus, we can do all manner of things besides. What he says is to imagine stripping away all the unwanted abilities, physical attributes, and so forth, and retain just the ability to astral travel element. This is basically what they create, genetically, which forms the heart of their propulsion system. So there does appear to be at least one other planetary civilization with the technology to transport themselves between universes. And the people I met there are very much aware of us here on Earth. At the moment, my understanding is next to zilch. But I am starting to find this area of discovery quite fascinating, to say the least. 6. Frank on the energy system, chakras. Much has been written about the physical body's energy system. The only problem is that there are so many belief constructs built around this that it is difficult to know how much of it is true, if anything. I have experimented with my body's energy system for many years, and I can say that the overall concept of a system of energy centers or chakras is a correct one. The problem is, there are so many belief constructs about them that this tends to confuse matters. For this reason, I tend to use the term energy centers rather than the word chakras, as the latter is so heavily weighed down with Eastern New Age baggage. I have found that we certainly do have an extensive energy system, which is closely related to our physical bodies. This system features a series of energy centers based at different points along the length of the human body. In nature, creative energies tend to spin clockwise, as we would call it, and I have observed that these bodily energy centers also rotate in a clockwise fashion. These energy centers are whorls of energetic movement. They are not fixed in stone, but you can imagine them as a kind of sphere in the approximate locations you see typically presented in chakra diagrams. They spin clockwise and are oriented such that they spin along the axis of the spine. The further up you go, the faster they spin. It starts at the root, red, and you could think of this red center spinning at about 10 or 12 times a second. Then add that factor for each one going up. The strongest vibrational color is therefore purple. This energy center has a strong directing influence on all the others. These energy centers are translated as different colors, as color has different vibrational qualities that are affecting in terms of energy in different ways. Color is a truth, meaning there is a representation of color within all dimensions. Energy has specific qualities that objectively translate in particular ways, and one of those ways in which we objectively view these particular differences or translations is in terms of color. Each energy center is affecting of various functions of the body, but this is to be thought of again as not absolutely fixed in stone. This is because all the energy centers are affecting of each other to varying degrees. They are not acting in isolation, in the sense of each energy center doing their particular bit, as I have seen many websites trying to make out. They are all influencing of each other and all work in combination. But there is a particular accent placed on each center to the extent where a particular energy center could be said to be more influencing of certain factors over another. For the purposes of bodily healing, I have found that the energy center that is the most affecting is the fourth one up, which is the green or the heart center as it is often called. Basically, in my experience, the general notion of chakras is correct, but be careful about getting bogged down with all the belief constructs that have built up around our body's energy system. 7. Authors recommended by Frank. There is a lot of material out there written about our wider reality. A lot of it is guff. There is also some good stuff amongst the dross. As always, however, don't just accept what you read as gospel truth. Research moves on, and new findings replace old ones. In spite of that, I would recommend 3 authors in particular. Robert M. Monroe. His pioneering work is seminal. His first book, Journeys Out of the Body, is now largely outdated. However, I would recommend his 2 later books, Far Journeys and Ultimate Journey. He is prone to a bit of poetic metaphor now and again, which does tend to get in the way sometimes, but overall he is fantastic. It all started here, a graduate of the Monroe School. He attended the Monroe Institute and was deeply impressed with what he found. He has now become an important author in his own right in the field of afterlife research. He generally follows the Monroe model and is a specialist in the art of retrievals. He is a pioneer of a particular focus approach that utilizes an F1, F3 overlay, enabling the practitioner to interact with F3 realities while still remaining largely within F1. I have had some success in duplicating this approach, but I am not as good as Bruce. Again, like Monroe, he has a tendency for poetic license sometimes, particularly with regards to his unconditional love aspect, which I tend to view as being more the effect that subjective energy has on us rather than an energy in itself. This author takes a psychological approach to the wider reality, as transmitted through Seth, her guide. I have read 2 of her Seth books, and I can vouch for their accuracy. Too much concurs with my own experience, particularly in the way Seth talks about the structure of consciousness. When I first read the books, it was a revelation to me, as hardly a page went by that didn't qualify something or other from my own experience. However, it has to be said that Jane Roberts gets more than a little tiresome in places. But I suppose it was the 1960s.